Well, Rod, thanks for taking the time to hang out with me today. I appreciate you being here.
Let's have some fun, brother. I'm really looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too. I've been looking forward to it all week. This is like the cherry on top of a great week on the end of a Friday. It's fantastic.
Kind of you to say that. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, let's start with just a little bit of context for our listeners. You have had a heck of a ride in your career already so far. Some very notable ups and some very notable downs that I know brought you to a point where you wanted to help spread the spread the love and share knowledge. Can you tell us just a little bit about kind of how you got to this point where you would be, a podcaster with almost 900 episodes and guests on other podcasts and one of the largest educators in the country? Tell us how you got there.
Well, thank you. I'm glad you said so far, by the way. I appreciate you putting that in there. Thank you. I am 63 years old, but I'm nowhere near done. Well, let's see. I'm going to go way back because I think it'll lend some context to what we're going to talk about. So I'm a Dutch immigrant. I was born in the Netherlands, think wooden shoes and windmills, and immigrated when I was 6 years old with my brother Albert, my mother Svantje. And we ended up in Denver, Colorado, and really struggled initially. We didn't have much. And I remember my mom babysat kids. We always had a house full of kids so that we'd have enough money to eat. And with her babysitting money, she actually became kind of an entrepreneur. And so she invested in the stock market successfully in IPOs, but she also invested in real estate. Her first real estate acquisition was the house directly across the street from us. When I was 14, she paid $30,000. And then when I was 17, she told me she'd made $20,000 in her sleep that had gone up in value that much. And I said, "What?" This is when 20,000 was a lot of money. I said, "You made 20 grand, you didn't do anything? Screw college, I'm getting into real estate." So I went out, got my real estate broker's license right when I turned 18, which you were able to do back then with education. I could have my own office. I was a broker. Now they got smart. You need some experience before you can be a broker. But, I got into real estate. I was still living at home with mom. And my first year in real estate, I made about 8 grand. My second year, I made about 10 grand. But my third year, I made over $100,000, which back in 1980 was some decent money. And so what happened between year 2 and year 3 that caused me to 10x my income? Well, what happened was I met a guy, his name was Gino. I was actually dating his daughter, and he taught me about the importance of mindset and psychology, and how really 80 to 90% of your success in anything is just that, your mindset and psychology. And, fast forward to today, Jeff, I've owned over 2,000 houses that I've rented long-term in 3 states. I own thousands of apartment units now. In 2006, my net worth went up about $16 million while I slept. And you might say, wow, actually it was 17. Now that I'm sorry, I'm having a brain fart here. It was $17 million. And you might say, wow. And I said, wow. And I got a head so big I could barely fit it through a door. And when that happens, God or the universe can have a tendency to give you a nice little smackdown. Well, that was 2008. I lost that 17 million, a whole lot more. I actually lost $50 million in 2008 and 9. And so, what I'm known for talking about on my podcast and at my boot camps and on social media and whatnot is really a lot about mindset. The mindset for me that it took to have 50 million to lose in the first place. And then probably more important, the mindset it took to recover from losing all that to the success that I'm blessed to have today. So, I'm happy to drill down on some of that strategy with you if you like, because I think it'll help even if you're listening and you've already got some assets and you want to take it to another level, or you're doing some real estate, because I think soup is coming. I think the what's about to hit the what, and fear will be pervasive. Again, if you'd like me to expand a little bit on some of these strategies, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I absolutely would. And I think
Okay.
one of the initial questions or just reactions is when you hear about somebody who has a very challenging experience. I mean, that I can't even, I don't think I know of any stories that are more dramatic than what you just mentioned and that type of a loss. But now you are back in the game. There are lots and lots of people I think would just be scared off entirely, right? So what
Sure.
are some of the things that made you say, all right, I'm going to come back. I'm going to, build myself back up, and I'm going to stay in a similar game, but I'm sure there's a lot of things you're doing differently as well. So I guess maybe what didn't scare you off about that, and what are some of the key things that you have been for the last, decade or so, 15 years, been doing differently than you were doing before that?
Well, it was It was my single family that pulled me down. So I had 800 houses along the Gulf Coast of Florida here, 2 hours north of me, 2 hours south of me, and everywhere in between. And I also had some apartment complexes. And it was the houses that pulled me down. I was only at a 30% loan to value. I only owed 30 cents on the dollar, and I still crashed and burned. So here's why. I don't always drill down on this, but I will since you asked it the way you did. So in Florida, there's no state income tax, so property taxes are proportionally higher, which impacts cash flow. I had properties in wind and flood zones, higher insurance, which impacts cash flow because I'm along the Gulf here. But what really killed me is these 800 houses were C-class houses. You know, there's A, B, C, and D. D's the hood, stay out of the hood, and A is brand new. These were C, older properties. Run down in some cases, you know, I'd fix them back up, but a tougher demographic as well. So lots of maintenance. Now, see, if I had to send a maintenance guy to one of my apartment complexes, everything's the same. So, you know, plumbing parts, electrical parts, HVAC parts, you know, window locks, door locks, everything's the same. So we could stockpile parts and they're in and out in an hour. Well, if I just send somebody that's an hour and a half away, one way to see what's wrong with the house, and they got to go see what's wrong. Every house is different. Then they've got to go find a Home Depot or a Lowe's where we'd have an account. And, you know, that could be an hour and a half round trip. And so what took an hour at one of my apartment complexes took all day at one of my 800 houses. And these had a lot of maintenance. So these guys were always running around and that really killed the cash flow. But what the kind of the final straw was, I didn't really pay attention to tenant demographics back then. So, you know, if they had a good job, they had decent credit, and they put a deposit down, I allowed them to rent. And what I didn't realize until after it was all blown up was I had a ton of contractors in my homes, plumbers, electricians, drywallers, painters, roofers, and all that fell off a cliff in 2008 and 9. They didn't have work. And so the whole thing kind of imploded. I just couldn't hold it together. And unfortunately, I'd cross-collateralized my apartment buildings with packages of houses to save 50 basis points, you know, 0.5% interest. So I lost everything. And, you know, but it's, you know, it was painful, but I never lost the drive. I mean, I knew, you know, that I had the drive, and I call them seminars. That was a $50 million seminar. Now, in my career so far, Jeff, I've started 27 businesses. I was shocked when I counted this a couple of years ago. 27 businesses, several worth tens of millions of dollars, most spectacular flaming seminars. Okay. But we fail our way to success. Okay. There really is no failure unless you don't get back up or you don't give the lesson. And that's why I call them seminars. And, you know, and so, you know, what I did to get back on my feet was the strategies I was just going to describe is, well, the first thing is I got really clear on what I wanted again. I reassociated with my goals. And so, for example, if you come to one of my boot camps, the first hour, literally first hour and a half is goal setting. I call it goal setting on steroids, because how the heck do you get anything, Jeff, if you don't know what it is? You got to know what you want. And you've got to know why you want it. And so, you know, here's the sad reality. People spend more time planning a freaking Christmas party or birthday party than they do designing their lives. And this is designing your life. And by the way, I'll mention this. I do my goal setting workshop here in my studio with music, professionally done every New Year's Day for the year. And here's where you can access it. Go to rodslinks.com, rodslinks.com. And at the bottom is my goal setting workshop. And there's a guide you can download. I'm not going to try to sell you anything. Do it with your spouse. If your kid's over 10 years old, have them do it. It's incredibly powerful. And to get clear on what you want and why you want it, especially in what's coming. Okay. With this economic environment that we're in, I really believe it's a train heading towards a brick wall, particularly in commercial real estate. And we can drill down on why I believe that if you'd like. And so there's going to be a lot of fear. And don't get me started on the news. It's all crap anyway. You don't know what to believe with the news anymore. And just don't forget this. The news is not a public service thing. It's a poor profit thing. And so the scarier they can make it, the more, negative they can make it, the better they do. And so, but going, if you're listening to this or watching this on YouTube or whatever, Jeff and I, you're a leader. And right now the world needs leaders more than ever. But as a leader, you got to pay attention to your focus. And so, it's going to be real easy to get distracted by the fear mongering on the news. But if you've got your goals done and you're clear on what you want and you focus on that, this could be the greatest opportunity for a transfer of wealth in our history if it gets as bad as I think it's going to get. And so, but you got to be up to speed. You got to be ready. So it starts with goals, and then after that, you've got to make a decision. Okay. After you're clear on what you want, you've got to make a decision. And, the Latin root for the word decision means to cut off. Okay. It's not a dip in the toe in the water. It's not 1 foot in, 1 foot out. I mean, you decide it is freaking done. And an example of a real decision would be you attack the island in battle, you burn your ships because you're taking their ships home. That's a decision. It's done. And then you're committed. And once you're committed, you're like a train on a track. But if you're not committed, you're going to get knocked off track. So it starts with a decision, and then you got to take the first step. And it can be the biggest step of your life. Dr. Martin Luther King said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single. I'm sorry, that was Lao Tzu. Lao Tzu said the journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. Dr. Martin Luther King said, you take that first step in faith and the next step will be revealed. But you got to take it. And I see it with my students all the time. And it's like the law of the first deal. It's 6 months in, they don't have one yet. It's 8 months in, and sometimes even a year, and they're moaning and I'm pushing them and everything else. And then they get one. And next thing you know, they have 3 more. I'm like, what just happened? Because that first deal, it's the scariest. It takes the longest. It's the most stressful. And then once it's done, they realize it's not that big a deal. But you've got to take that first step. And then I would say you got to play to your strengths. The multifamily real estate game, especially the world I live in, which is, commercial multifamily, 5 units or larger. I know you do a lot of residential multifamily, which is 2 to 4 units, but in my world, it's a team sport. You can do residential on your own. I mean, I bought 2,000 houses pretty much on my own, but I would not buy 150, 250, 400 unit apartment complex on my own. It's a team sport. And honestly, that's a plus because there are a lot of different hats you can wear in this business. You could be the outgoing person, that's building the relationships with the investors or the brokers or, sellers. Or you could be the analytical person. I mean, real estate's pretty empirical. It's primarily numbers. You get the numbers right. You ask all the right questions. Pretty hard to make a big mistake. So you need somebody that's analytical that can underwrite a deal. And then, you also need a process-driven person, somebody that has maybe managed people or done construction management or construction to do the asset management after you buy an asset. We call them assets, these larger properties. And so, but you got to play to your strengths because your strengths are your greatest assets. And, people will tell you to build your weaknesses. And I completely disagree because if you're playing to your strengths, first of all, it's what you're good at. So you love it. Okay. So you're going to be good at it. You're going to love it. And if you're doing what you love, you never work another day in your life, right? Work is play. But even more importantly than that, if you're playing to your strengths and you love it, you're going to be passionate about it. And to influence people requires passion. And people, they want to be around people they can feel are passionate about what they're doing. And certainly any business, doesn't even have to be real estate, requires that ability to influence, and passion makes that so much easier. So, yeah. But please, I could keep going. So if you want to interrupt me and ask something, please do, because I keep going.
No, I appreciate the passion. I'm really glad that you brought up the idea of playing to your strengths. I feel like that notion is not maybe as common in this real estate space as I would expect it to be. I find that a lot of times people, my perception anyway, is that people start learning real estate and then it's kind of overwhelming by itself. And they get this subconscious idea in their mind that there is an exact way you do real estate, that this is the template and you must conform to the template. But I'm often thinking, I wish these people would take the time to think more about their own unique talents and gifts, and then actually design their own approach to real estate, because there's obviously 8 billion different ways to go about real estate.
There are, for sure.
So a lot of the people who listen to this show, I would say, are probably relationship-oriented types of folks. That would be one of their talents.
Okay.
Sitting, listening, connecting, building rapport with people. If you were working with somebody who had that type of people skill set, probably among others, but they want to highlight that.
That's their primary one. That's the one they enjoy. They're an extrovert, in other words. Well, here's what I would tell them to do. I would tell them to be the one that builds the relationships with the brokers. Be the one that's out there raising money for deals. And that's the beautiful thing. Like in your world, your deals are primarily people are coming out of pocket. Maybe there's some partnerships and things like that. But in my world, people raise money for these deals. Now, these big multifamily properties take money, but it doesn't have to be your own money. That's the amazing thing. And so, I can tell you, I'm going to brag for a minute. My students, I've been teaching a little over 5 years. My students own somewhere between 160 and 170,000 units now. We're counting right now. We're at about 158, and it's going up, and we've got a whole bunch more people to talk to, and I think it's going to hit 170. But the thing about that is most of those, these are called my warriors, my students, most of those deals were done between warriors. And so people playing to their strengths. I would tell you, play to your strengths, hire a line or partner for your weaknesses. Some of the best partnerships that I see in my world, which is, moderately larger multifamily, just very much larger multifamily, is a match made in heaven is an analytical person with an outgoing person, an analytical introvert with an outgoing extrovert. Man, I see that time and time again. And those are matches made in heaven because both things are required in this business. Now, sometimes I'll meet people that are great at both. I just interviewed one today, one of my warriors that has, I was shocked how many he had, over 8,000 units now. And occasionally I'll meet one that's great at both, and he's great at both. He's both analytical and outgoing, but that's unusual. That's an anomaly. But when you're playing to your strengths, if you're that kind of person that's a people person, I am too, and I didn't realize it at first because I was very, let me talk about fear and limiting beliefs for a second because it'll lend itself to what I'm going to say next. So, a lot of people get caught up in fear, and what is fear? False evidence appearing real, F everything and run. I like to think it's face everything and rise, because I will tell you that massive action eliminates fear. Gratitude eliminates fear. You can't be grateful and fearful at the same time. But I'm going to tell you, if you are that person, like you're fearing failure or fearing whatever, fear regret more than anything else. There was a nurse in Australia named Bronnie Ware. She was a hospice nurse, so she took care of patients when they were about to die. And she asked him a question, Jeff, and the question was, do you have any regrets? And she wrote a book. It's called The 5 Regrets of Dying. You know what the number one regret was? It was not living the life I could have lived, living someone else's life, not doing what I know I'm capable of. If you want to fear something, fear that. Don't fear falling on your face. Again, I failed 23 times, and that's okay, because I get back up, I dust myself off, and I keep going. I got to meet the billionaire owner of Spanx, Sarah Blakely, the women's undergarments, they hold it all together. Started with $5,000, and she's a billionaire now. And I met her at a mastermind that we were both at. And she told me her dad used to ask her on about a weekly basis, her and her brother, what have you failed at this week? And I thought, what a great freaking question to ask your kids so they don't fear failure. But the other thing I want to mention is limiting beliefs. So when I immigrated to this country, I didn't speak English, and I got thrown into school, and I found out what bullies were for the first time. And then, it's funny. Oh, I have it right here. Hang on, I got to show you something. Give me 1 second.
Sure.
So my mom, proud Dutch woman that she is, sent me to school in these wooden shoes right here. We found these in the house when we put her in assisted living, and these leather shorts right here that the Germans wear for Oktoberfest. So I got my ass kicked again, And then we had some of these bullies lived on my street, and they would chase me home. And she chased him off with a fly swatter. So the next day, butt kicking. And I came up with this belief system that I wasn't good enough. I used to ask myself, how can I show them I'm good enough? Which of course presupposed I wasn't. Now see, Jeff, a lot of people have these limiting belief systems. I'm not good enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not strong enough. I'm not analytical enough. That was another one of mine. I don't have enough time, enough money. The thing to remember is there's a reason the acronym for belief systems is BS, because 99% of them are BS. It's something that happened to us in our childhood. We think it's real, we think it's factual, and it's not. So if you're listening or watching and you've got one of these BS belief systems, drag it out into the daylight when it pops up. Consciously think about it when it happens. Recognize that it's BS, and you'll deal with it. You'll get rid of it. I used to be afraid to raise my hand in class, afraid that I'd get embarrassed or humiliated. Now I speak in front of literally thousands of people a year. So you can deal with these limiting beliefs and get rid of them. Very important. Another thing I want to mention is peer group, especially in what's coming. When I was losing everything in 2008, I was in Tony Robbins' Platinum Partnership. Okay, it was about 130,000 at the time, all in with the travel and everything. It's more than that now, but And I was around people back then that were killing it. They were thriving in that crash. They had figured out a way to capitalize on it. They were killing it. And they're telling me like, get up, you puss, 50 million schmillion, get up and make something happen. Now that's who you want to be around, right? When the what hits the fan, right? And so, the problem is most people default to peers that they work with or that they went to school with, for example. And sometimes those people don't have your best interests out of their own fear, their own limiting beliefs, fear of failure, fear of being left behind, fear of feeling humiliated if you succeed. And here's the bad thing. Sometimes it's even family. So, I would tell you, love your family, but choose your peers. Proactively decide who you're going to hang out with. Get around a group of people that want more out of life, that aren't going to be caught up in fear, again, especially in what we're headed into here. And you'll be great. And I think that's why my warriors, my coaching students are so successful, because everybody's praising each other. There's no jealousy. It's validation. And anyway, I'll keep rambling if you don't cut me off and ask me something.
Well, a few minutes ago, you mentioned, your perspective on where we're headed economically and what that means for business and real estate. And I do want to get into some of those thoughts in a minute and how we can all prepare to take advantage of the opportunities that are coming and protect ourselves. But what, a thought that I had as I was listening to that is, it made me wonder, how does a person stay in touch enough with news and understanding what's developing without subjecting themselves to just the insane, incredible negativity that comes from being too tied to the news? I find myself erring too far, probably on the one side of, I don't look at news really at all, because it's so heavy and so negative. But at the same time, I know there's some downsides potentially to that. So how do you maintain, not being ignorant? But
no, good question, really good question. And I will tell you, the key is not to live there. Okay. You need to stay on top of what's happening. I get several emails. I get a Wall Street Journal email that kind of summarizes the main stuff that's happened every day. I also get commercial real estate news. Let's see, CRE Connect. And then my students all have a list of literally 50 news related websites. All of the big brokerage houses put news out there, and it's very, there's no bias there. It's just real factual data on what's happening in the real estate market. Marcus and Millichap does it, Grubb and Ellis does it, CBRE does it. All these big real estate companies that you've heard of put out they have research teams that research what's happening in each geographic area. And like I say, we get those links to our students, and you can look them up yourself, but that's the kind of news you should be paying attention to. That's real factual based news, like talking about foreclosures that are happening. The Wall Street Journal. I don't know if you saw the Wall Street Journal a couple of weeks ago about that huge foreclosure in Houston, where this operator and it taints the whole industry, because they, again, they find these real nefarious characters. And this guy was nefarious. He ran off with 14 million is what I heard. And he's in India now, from his investors. But, you've got to take it with a grain of salt. If you're watching ABC, CBS, NBC, even Fox, I don't believe half of what I read, because there's such an agenda that you've got to, really take it all with a grain of salt. Now, do I look at it all? Yes, I look at it all, but I have a lot of skepticism about what I'm seeing. But then what I do though is I bring in the good stuff. Okay. And I put out the good stuff on my podcast. I do a clip every week called Own Your Power. Okay. It's 5 minutes. And I will tell you, you give me 5 minutes a week, I will juice you. Okay. They're motivational. There's music. They're powerful. I'm really proud of them. There's hundreds of them there. And again, if you go to rodslinks.com, or if you're driving, text the word links, LINKS, to 72345. Text links to 72345. And my podcast website's there. My boot camp site's there. Hopefully you'll let me talk about that in a little bit. But I'll also that goal setting, and a lot of free resources. My number one best-selling book, number one in multiple categories. You can get it for free. Well, you pay the shipping. It's like $6. You pay the shipping, you get the physical copy of the book, but there's also a lot of free books there again. So again, that's rodslinks.com. Even if you're not going to do multifamily, if you check out the podcast, like I said, just do the Own Your Power clips. I think you really find them very valuable because again, 80
Yeah.
to 90% of this is mindset. That's why my students are so successful. They take action with what they learn. And,
Yeah.
only 10 to 20% is the mechanical stuff we talk about on our shows, Jeff. I know you know that. I mean, people have to take action with what they hear. Most people will go to a seminar, for example, and they'll never do anything with it. 90% of them, not at my events, because I spend a lot of time on mindset, but
Yeah.
because it's just so important.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So it seems clear that the weather is changing around us, and I don't know
Oh,
if
yeah.
you believe in this perspective, but I try to think that weather is weather. It's neither necessarily good or bad. It could be a little extreme or windy, but it's kind of more about it maybe adjusting the sails to accommodate the weather rather than saying, "Oh, this weather sucks. We got to stay out of it. This weather's okay." So I guess assuming maybe you agree somewhat with that premise, what are some of the sales? How are we adjusting the sales now to get ready for what's coming up?
Yeah. I think the boat is going to crash into the rocks personally. Okay. But if you want to use the boating analogy, but with crisis comes opportunity. Okay. And I'm in a lot of cash right now. I have access to a lot of cash. But again, remember that the world I play in doesn't require your own cash. You can raise money. And a lot of, I've done it and a lot of my students have raised hundreds of millions of dollars for deals. But how are we getting ready? Um, we're battening down the hatches, the ones of us that have, units, and we're really paying attention to our key, KPIs, key performance indicators, our metrics. We're, being very strong on our asset management, very, um, uh, meticulous with our asset management. I mean, literally at the minimum weekly calls with our managers, and just paying attention at a micro level with what's happening, and that's critical right now. Okay, because I will tell you, I'm not, for example, I'm not buying any C class assets right now. There's A, B, C, and D, like we talked about. D is the hood. A is brand new. C, I'm not even buying C assets right now because that demographic's getting killed. I mean, I don't really pay attention when I go to the grocery store. Typically, if I do it for my wife, and I've done it the last couple of times, I'm like, are you kidding me? How do I see what I'm paying? Are you freaking kidding? $150 for that bag of groceries? And I don't know how people do it, Jeff. And then the gas as high as it is. I mean, they're getting killed. And I'll tell you, I've got a couple of articles here that I printed for this, and like here's one Forbes article. Expecting layoffs at 51% of U.S. companies, according to a new survey. But the one I really wanted to read was more than 20 million U.S. households are behind in their utility bills. And I saw one where people are using their credit cards to pay everyday bills. Okay. Is that a recipe for freaking disaster? Right.
Yeah.
And so again, I'm not trying to scare you. I'm trying to alert you to the fact that there is opportunity coming. And I'm going to tell you, everything's going on sale. Businesses, there are 80 million baby boomers. Many of them own businesses that they're going to need to sell. Everything's going on sale. Of course, every real estate asset class is going on sale. I wouldn't touch office right now, and maybe not even retail. But multifamily is fantastic. Single family is always good as long as you're not as spread out as I was. Industrial is good. Flex space is good. Mobile home parks, self storage, those are all fantastic. But, even people like Elon Musk, here's a direct quote from Elon Musk. Everyone's lying, exclamation mark. A bigger crash is coming. Okay. This is a pretty smart freaking guy. And here's another one. Donald Trump, love him or hate him, warns the U.S. economy could reach levels of the Great Depression. Okay. And these are direct quotes. I've been a bear for a while. I actually thought COVID was going to be the catalyst. Of course, it wasn't. COVID reinforced my love of multifamily because it's the only asset class that got help. I mean, if you owned a retail center or or an office building or self-storage or anything like that, you didn't get any help. But we got hundreds of thousands of dollars in rent relief money for our tenants and our C-class assets. And so, but I'm going to stay away from C-class right now. I'm doing kind of a flight to quality just because people that can afford an A and B class aren't going to be hurt as badly as, these people that are literally going paycheck to paycheck. And, we're already starting to see a little tick up in our defaults, tenant defaults in some of our assets that have a C element to them that I purchased before I made this decision. But, it is what it is. It is what it is. And as long as, if you're sitting in the sidelines right now and You just got a W-2 job. You want to do more for your family. If there was ever a time to pick a vehicle, meaning pick a, strategy and get up to speed as fast as possible. In fact, if you're going to do multifamily, can I mention my boot camp real quick?
Please
if you're
do.
Going to do if you're going to do multifamily, I only do one in-person live event a year just because they kill me. It's 3 days. It's going to be in Orlando, September 15th through the 17th. It's not a sales pitch. I talk about my coaching for like 30 minutes, but the rest of the time it's 3 full days of full-on training. The manual's 2 inches thick. Okay. It's drinking through a fire hose, but you'll leave there ready to go. And I cover every aspect of the business, soup to nuts, building a team, finding deals, financing those deals, raising the money you need for those deals, syndication, joint venture, due diligence, underwriting, property management, everything is covered. And here's the thing. If you use the code Jeff, when you can come for $197, $200 to come for 3 days of training. And if you don't love it, I don't mean like it, I mean freaking love it, I'll give you your $200 back, okay? And I mean that. So if you want to check it out, you can go to rodslinks.com and the bootcamp site's at the top, and use the code Jeff, and you can come for 100. It's a little more than that now, and it'll be $600 ultimately, but you can come for $197. And I've never had a complaint. That's a lie. People complain about the food sucking or the room being too cold, but never about the content. Okay. And it is a blast. I have 3 panels each day. The panelists own billions of dollars in property to answer questions, but we have a lot of fun, a lot of time spent on mindset and psychology. So people actually take action with what they learn there. And it's a love of mine. So again, Rod's links, use the code Jeff. Yeah, you bet.
Thank you. That's very, very generous. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
And I know our listeners do too. So a few days ago, I was starting to just think about this interview, and I thought, I'm going to go on my social media, and I just made a little post and I said, hey guys, I'm going to be interviewing Rod on Fridays, or anything you'd like me to ask him. And there were a few responses that I think the common denominator was, should we be waiting? Should we hold out?
I get that question all the time.
Yeah,
should I wait to buy? I wait to buy. I've got LOIs out on 2 deals right now. What's an LOI? It's called a letter of intent. And, in the commercial real estate space, if you're buying a duplex or a fourplex, have a broker write the contract, no big deal. When you buy 100 units, you always involve an attorney. Okay. Always. Even me. And I can write contracts. I've done so many of them, thousands of them, but you always involve an attorney. And of course, attorneys aren't free. So, in my world, what you write is called a letter of intent, and it talks about all the deal points and the purchase price and closing dates and earnest money and so on and so forth. And you get agreement on that, and then the attorneys fight it out for the purchase and sale agreement. But then you can spend money if they agree on the main terms. But we've got LOIs on 2 deals right now, screaming deals. Deals are coming out of the woodwork now, and so it's still not as much as I expect. I think it's still the people that kind of want to sell. It's not the people that have to sell yet, but the people that have to sell is coming. Here's why it's coming, Jeff. There is $1.6 trillion in commercial debt coming due by the end of next year. $1 trillion is a lot of money, okay? Half a trillion is multifamily, okay? Now here's the problem. For those people that have debt coming due, they either have to sell or they have to refinance. Well, there's been a 75% year-over-year decline in sales first quarter this year. 75% drop, okay? And I don't know if you've been watching the interest rates, but it is very, very difficult to borrow money again. And if interest rates, cap rates track interest rates. And in my world, cap rates is how you determine the value of a property. You divide that into the net income. And if the cap rate goes up, the value goes down. Well, so that is hurting people in their ability to refinance, but and the debt service coverage ratio, because they look at a property's ability to service the debt. Okay, it's not like in residential where they look at your personal income. They're looking at the property's ability to service the debt, and so that has gone down. But here's the other real killer. I did a Facebook Live on this. I had a dramatic title, "The Coming Bomb," because I think it is a bomb. It's interest rate caps. Okay. Because people, if they can't sell and they have to refinance, they're likely going to have to go with adjustable rate bridge debt. And a lot of people already have that onerous debt. And here's the problem. They have to pay for a rate cap. Now, what that means is you're paying to ensure that the rate won't go up more than a certain amount. I mean, you know this, Jeff. I'm trying to educate some of the listeners that may not know. But let me tell you, let me give you an example of why this is such a big deal. In 2020, if you wanted a rate cap for $100 million loan, 3%. So you're buying a 3% rate cap. It's not going to go up more than 3% the rate that you're quoted for 3 years. Okay. That costs you $23,000. If you want that same rate cap today, 100 million, 3% for 1 year, it's going to cost you 2.3 million.
Wow. That's mind-blowing.
Yes. And people don't have that kind of money. And so, that's why the train is headed towards a freaking brick wall. And we're not even talking about office. I'm just talking about multifamily for that in that regard. Office, right now, office is 20% vacant around the country, minimum. It could be more than that. Of course, it's much more than that in San Francisco, New York. But if you average it together, it's more than 20%. I just heard that from a huge broker. And so, and here's the thing. I don't know what the catalyst is going to be. It could be that office, but see, that debt is all held by regional banks and smaller banks. Okay. And when that debt goes south, what do you think is going to happen to those banks? Right. And so if they fail, that could be the catalyst. So again, I'm not trying to scare you. I want you to have your eyes wide open, but pick a freaking vehicle. I don't care if it's multifamily. If it's something else, great. I'd love to buy businesses. Honestly, I think it's going to be a great opportunity there. But you got to learn it right now. Learn how you're going to do this. If it's multifamily, I hope you come to my boot camp. I promise you'll be glad you came. There'll be at least 1,000 people there. That's what we're anticipating. We're on track for, and it's a lot of fun. But don't wait on the sidelines. Don't miss this opportunity, because if you're trying to learn whatever it is you're going to do to capitalize on what's coming, in the thick of it, it's going to be too late. You need to get up to speed. You need to build relationships. You got to, practice. You've got to underwrite and just learn the business as best you can, so that when the stuff pops up, you can move on it.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, absolutely. I always feel like when you allow yourself to get into that, I should wait a little longer mode, that's a very slippery slope, because you can kind of always find a reason to talk yourself into why you should wait.
Exactly. And that's the thing. There are always deals. Like I said, I wrote 2 today. I wrote 2 this week. Great deals. But am I being super conservative? Unbelievably conservative. Okay. No aggressive right now. Very, very conservative on our projections, on our break-even analysis and all these things we do to stress test a deal. Very conservative, but there are deals right now. People say, should I wait to buy real estate? I say, no, buy real estate and wait, right? You've heard that expression, I'm sure. Yeah. But you can buy in any market. Just sometimes you have to be more careful than others. And right now is one of those times, super careful. But I believe there are going to be exponential deals coming. And I really believe that. Now there's money waiting in the wings for some of this stuff, but mostly larger deals. I think, if you play in the sweet spot of like 20 to 50 units, it's not going to be as many players there, because a lot of them are getting the water's going out, and we're going to see who doesn't have clothes on here soon. Okay. And so, I'm shocked there's not more stuff on the market yet, but I think people are like holding out, hoping the interest rate's going to come back down. I don't see it. I mean, I think it's going to go up a little more, and God help. We'll have to see how it all shakes out, man. I hope it's not as bad as 08 and 09, because that was a bloodbath. But if it is, it is. And here's the other thing. Don't fear that. Sometimes you have to innovate. You have to pivot, and maybe you're going to be in that place. And I had to, like when COVID hit, I was scheduled to have 800 people in Orlando. And I'm like, holy cow. I mean, it sold half those tickets. What are we going to do? I can't afford to refund that money. And I pivoted, and I built this studio here in my house, in my compound here in Florida. And now I've had, I do better with these virtual events than I do with my live events. And I've had thousands and thousands of people attend my virtual events now here in this studio. And so if you're in that place now, I know you're on the West Coast, and a lot of people lost their jobs in the IT space. There's been tons of layoffs, and, just recognize that you've got superpowers, you've got skill sets, and you may have to innovate, and it'll be uncomfortable, but you've got this. Just go do it.
Yeah. So these last few minutes of the economic stuff that's going on and interest rates and whatnot is a really great segue to what I know that is one of our favorite topics here on this show.
Seller financing.
In my community. Yes, exactly. So I know that it's played a role in your business and your journey. Sure. And again, the relevance of seller financing kind of changes over time based on what's happening.
No, it's very relevant right now. It's an incredible strategy, because, there are people that are selling assets that have very low interest rates on them, like 3%. Okay, I bought a 296 unit asset in San Antonio a year ago, September, and the interest rate's 3.2%. This last asset I bought in Nashville is 5.4%. Okay, but those assets that have these low interest rates require a lot more money out of pocket. But if you can get a seller to finance, or and there's some other creative structures, you can have the seller stay in the deal, in these larger deals as well, or you can have a seller. There's lots of different ways. But let me give you what I teach from stage about seller financing, because I talk about going direct to seller with marketing, mailers, and I give all sorts of great strategies on how to go direct to seller. But what I like to tell people to do is to target people that have owned at least 20 years. If the list is too small, then go to 10 years. But I tell them, target people that have owned 20 years. And you're only mailing, we'll just talk about mailers for a second, Jeff. You're only mailing, if you're targeting people, let's say 10 units to 50 units in Tampa, which is a huge MSA, meaning metropolitan statistical area, big MSA like Phoenix, Denver, these big metropolitan areas. If you target people that have owned 20 years, you're only going to get a few hundred names, okay? So it's not like thousands. But here's the thing. If they've owned 20 years, they're likely retired. They're also likely not to have any more tax benefits. They're fully depreciated, okay? And so when you go to one of these people and you approach them and say, hey, Mr. Smith, I'm going to pay $1 million for your property, and if you take that money, well, first of all, if you sell it and I get new financing, you get paid out, you're only going to be able to keep 60 or 70 cents on the dollar, because Uncle Sam's going to take the rest. So you'll be able to keep $600,000-700,000, and you're going to put it in the bank. Now, banks are paying a little more now. I found banks that'll pay as high as 4%. Back in the day, it was a 1%. But you could even say, banks will pay you 2, 3, 4%. But and so here's what your payment will be, okay, for on your 600,000 or 700,000. You work it out for them. This is important, that you calculate what an estimated payment based on how much they'd net. Because here's the thing: if they're retirees, they're not going to take that money and put it into another high risk asset. They're going to put it in the bank. So they're very risk conscious. Okay, so that's why this strategy is very effective with a retiree. And you just tell them, Mr. Smith, if you allow me, I'll give you enough of a down payment so I'm serious, but I'm going to pay you 6, 7, 8% interest. You do the math, and the numbers still may be fabulous. Okay, I will tell you, when I started in real estate, I remember doing backflips when the interest rate hit 8%. When I started in 1978, it was 18%. Okay, and I remember just being when I had deals at 7%, I was like, "Are you kidding me? This is incredible." So please have some context about interest rates. And so you tell them, say, Mr. Smith, here's I'll pay you enough down payments so I'm serious, and you're only going to pay taxes on the amount you receive from me every year, and I'll pay you 6, 7, 8% interest. Here's the amount you'll get from me, and it'll likely be 2 or 3 times what they'd get in the bank. And so, if you have that conversation with them congruently, then, it's a compelling thing, because most of the time they just want cash flow anyway when they get older. So I'm specifically talking about retirees here. The other thing I want to tell you is, if you're dealing with retirees, seller bonding is huge, okay? At that age, people are more interested in the relationship than they are in the finances. And so you focus on making friends first, not to take advantage of them, I'll hunt you down, but to create a win-win situation, right? And you bond with them. And I will tell you, I have bonded with elderly sellers where I didn't pay anything down. They just wanted the payment. It's a large deal too. And I've bonded with sellers where I didn't make a payment for a year because the property was trashed. I think it was a 5 unit. And I'm like, whatever their name was, I don't remember anymore. The property's trashed. I need to put money back into it as I rent units, and I'll pay you as quickly as I've done. That was the truth. And I bonded with them, and I'd make a payment for a year. So that's what's possible. Seller bonding, super important with retirees, but seller financing is extraordinary. And there's so many different ways to structure deals. You could go out and find land that's zoned for new construction, zoned for like a multi-units, and have the seller participate in the deal and split it with them, and have very little out of pocket and go get financing and build some units. It's a very common business model. Have sellers stay in a deal to minimize the amount of equity that needs to be raised for a deal, the amount of money you've got to raise from investors. So, but seller financing is fantastic, because obviously they're not checking your credit. Well, they may check your credit on a larger deal to see that you're for real, but it doesn't show up on your credit, and you can negotiate any kind of terms you want. That's the beautiful thing about it. Yeah. So No, I love
Absolutely.
seller financing. I haven't done it in quite a while. I did help an operator, big operator, buy 500 units with seller financing. I coached him on that. It's been a while, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's such a nice little closing of the loop back to the topic we had a little bit ago about utilizing your strengths. And if your strengths
Yeah.
are in the category of human relations and connection, the seller bonding that you were talking about in that process, that's a huge part of what we tend to talk about in this community. And I couldn't agree more. It's a great use of those skills.
Awesome. Yeah. Let me give you one unique negotiation strategy that I learned from a gentleman named Ron LeGrand. He's a long of tooth guy that I learned from, gosh, decades ago. In fact, when I started learning from him, I already had 1,000 houses, and so he'd bring me up and stuff like that. But he taught me this, and he said, go to a seller and say, if I can pay all cash and close very quickly, what's the least you'd take? And then regardless of the answer, when they say the answer, you go, is that the best you can do? Even if you want to do backflips when you hear the price they quoted, you say, and that has made me millions of dollars. I'm not exaggerating. Millions. You always just go, is that the best you can do? And it's buy low, sell high. I mean, people, I get haters sometimes when I post that strategy, but that's the way the world is. You buy low, sell high as best you can. But I love seller financing for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, you got your boot camp coming up in
Yep.
September, and
Yep.
with that code,
Use the code
rodslinks.com.
Jeff. Yep.
Code Jeff.
Rod's
Yeah.
links. Yep.
Okay. Thank you
Yep.
for that. It's very, very generous.
Sure.
And just generous for you to be here and share your expertise and
I
vast
appreciate
experiences
that.
with our audience. So thank you so
Yeah,
much.
I appreciate that. No problem. Yeah, it's almost 9 o'clock here, and I have a supermodel, beautiful wife, and I'm not exaggerating. And she's more beautiful on the inside than the outside. And so, I think that shows you how passionate it is about what I do. I absolutely love what I do. In fact, let me leave you with one last thought, because I think it'll round this thing out really nicely. So, when I lived in Denver, I always knew I wanted to live on the beach, and there's obviously no beach in Denver, but I would visualize, the palm trees and the sand and the surf. For 20 years, I visualized it. And 20 years in, I built this incredible $8 million, 10,000 square foot house on the beach, and which was unthinkable when I was 18, but I made it happen. But there's a message in this. So 2 months after I moved into this incredible home, I owned the beach on one side and I had my boats on the backside. It was like called a Gulf to Bay. It was a slice through an island. And, just to describe this place, I had a giant waterfall from the second floor balcony into the pool. You had to walk through the waterfall to get in the pool. Pool was in magazines. I had big spiral staircase up through the middle of the house, wine cellar, elevator. On the second floor, I had aquariums built around the spiral staircase, custom made, cost me almost 200 grand. So this gives you an idea of the house. So 2 months after I moved in, I'm floating in the pool at night. It's changing colors. It's got fiber optic lighting. And I'm looking up at this testament to my ego, which is really what it was. It was to prove the world I was good enough. And it's embarrassing to admit that sometimes, but I'm looking up at this thing, and I'd worked for it for 20 years. And this was 2 months after I moved in, and I got depressed. And I don't mean a little depressed. I mean, I was really depressed. I'm like, what the hell? How could I be depressed? I've just achieved success like times 10,000. I had a beautiful family inside sleeping. I had all the toys, the Maserati and the Mercedes and the boats and the jet skis and all the stuff. And what had happened, which is what I want to share as a final note with your audience here, Jeff, is, it's never about the goals. You need the goals to create burning desire. You've got to have that to push through the fear and the limiting beliefs and get uncomfortable. But like they say, the happiest days of a boat owner's life, the day they buy the boat and the day they sell the boat. You need the goals to get you off your butt to go make it happen. But it's about happiness comes from progress and growth. And I didn't know how I was going to continue to grow after that. So that was one piece. But the bigger piece was I had been totally focused on me. Rod, show the world I'm good enough. Show the world I matter, right? And that's the year I met Tony Robbins and went and saw him live, and highly encourage you to see him if you have an opportunity. But I saw that he fed families for the holidays. And I'm like, what a concept, do something for someone else. I'm embarrassed to say I had to be 40 to get that memo. But I called my brother, who I was going to go visit for Thanksgiving in Denver. And I said, bro, let's feed 5 families. And so he called his church, got 5 families that really needed help. And we bought frozen turkeys and food and toys for the kids. And the third family changed my life, Jeff. We go up to this house. There's this woman in this one bedroom with 5 kids. And it was a crappy one bedroom at that. It's a Hispanic woman. She comes out. She starts crying when she sees all the stuff on the porch. Her kids come out. 2 of the older ones start crying. I start crying, and I'm hooked. And I'm blessed to say in the last 23 years, we have fed over 140,000 children here in Sarasota and Bradenton. We have done tens of thousands of backpacks filled with school supplies to local kids. We're doing 1,500 backpacks on August 4th coming up. Kids that don't have the basic supplies for school. We've done tens of thousands of teddy bears for local police departments, for officers to keep in their vehicles. If they encounter a child that's been traumatized, they can comfort the child. Now, I'm not saying this to brag, but I know that you've got listeners that are listening to your show. They've got blood dripping from their teeth. They want this success so bad. They want to build that passive income. And I'm here to tell you guys, we've been taught to achieve to be happy. Like, we should not be happy until we reach some level of achievement. I'm going to tell you, if you give back, I know it's a play on words, but it's an important one. If you give back, you're happily achieving. And I'm going to tell you that, Tony Robbins calls it the science of achievement versus the art of fulfillment. Achievement's a science. If you want to learn multifamily, come to my freaking boot camp. I'll give you the map and the blueprint. You just got to go do it. It's a science. But fulfillment is an art, okay? Find something that juices you. For me, it's kids. Maybe for you, it's animals or the environment or the elderly, and give back right now. Even if you didn't, and don't say to yourself, yeah, you had money, that's why you were able to do it. No, even if you don't have money, if you just have your time, give your time. Why? Because the money will come faster. Okay, now that you don't do it for that reason, but that's just the way God works. That's the way the universe works. So give back right now. You will thank me, and you will be happily achieving. You'll not just be successful, you'll be fulfilled.
Beautiful. As I think we call this community here of mine the thoughtful real estate entrepreneur community. And I think that is
I like that.
a very, very thoughtful way to wrap this up and to put a bow on that. And I need that reminder myself a lot. And I get little glimpses of it, and then I let it slip away. And so thank you for that, because that's a little gift for me to remember as well.
Yeah, thank you for letting me ramble. I'm glad you allowed me to add that last little piece, because it's important.
I'm very grateful for it. Grateful for all of it. Thank you so much for being here to share your expertise with us, Rod.
I appreciate it, Jeff. It's great to meet you. I hope I meet you in person one day.
I hope so too. Thank you.